Going to get started here in just a minute. Just gotta wait for everybody to go live. And then once it's live, then we can start. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. All right. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the All About Nothing podcast kind of daily show. I am Bear Gruber, host of the All About Nothing podcast. You can find me across all of social media at Bear Gruber. If you'd like to participate in the show, you can do that by visiting our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com, and chat with us on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook. Again, you can find links on our webpage, theallaboutnothing.com. Please follow and subscribe wherever it is you're listening to us. Let's go ahead and get it started. Again, happy Memorial Day. Want to acknowledge that right up front because it matters. Today is not about sales. It's not about barbecues, though I'm not judging anyone that likes to have their barbecue. Memorial Day is set aside specifically to honor the men and women who died in service to this country. Not the ones who served and came home. It's the ones who didn't. The ones whose families have an empty seat at the table, whatever you think about wars they were sent to fight. Whatever your politics are, these people deserve to be named and remembered. So if you're carrying that kind of loss today, this show is dedicated to you. And here's why I think what we do here on this show every Monday and Wednesday actually connects to that, or how it connects to that. The people we honor today died believing in something, a democracy worth protecting, rights worth defending, a country worth fighting for. The best thing that I know how to do is to honor that, is to stay awake, to pay attention, to talk about the things that matter even when they're uncomfortable. So that's what we're going to do today. I've got a full show for you. We're going to talk about hospital closings across this country because of the bill that was sold to you as a prosperity. We're going to talk about Iran. We're 3 months into it, and nobody in charge can tell us what the end game is. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court gutting Voting Rights Act and what Donald Trump said out loud right after the ruling that should have set alarm bells off from coast to coast. And then we're going to wrap up by talking about early voting because everything else I say today is meaningless if people don't show up. So we're going to get started. I want to start out with something that I think directly connects to Memorial Day. Or at least what it's supposed to mean. We talk a lot about honoring the people who sacrificed for this country, but what does it say about us as a country when we can't even keep hospitals open? When the people who make it home from war, or who are just trying to raise their kids or take care of their aging parents, can't get basic medical care because the facility nearest to them just closed, because that's where we're at now. Since the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill, more than 800 hospitals, nursing homes, maternity wards, psychiatric centers, and other care facilities across this country have either closed entirely, cut services, or are at risk of doing so. 800. Let that sit in. 800 places where people go when something's wrong, when they're in labor, when their father can't breathe, when someone they love is in crisis and needs mental health care right now, not next week, not after a 2-hour drive. 800 of those places gone or going. And here's what makes me the angriest about this is they lied to you. They lied to me. They lied to all of us. The Republicans did. They looked at the American people in the eye, on camera, in press conferences, in campaign speeches, and said Medicare is safe. We're not going to cut Medicare. But the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, not a Democratic talking point, not a progressive think tank, the nonpartisan CBO confirmed that this law will automatically trigger $45 billion in Medicare cuts in 2026 alone, and $536 billion over the next 9 years. They knew. The mechanism isn't complicated. When legislation blows up the federal deficit, a law called the Statutory Pay-As-You-Go Act automatically triggers across-the-board spending cuts. Republicans understood exactly how this worked. They passed it anyway. And then they went in front of cameras and told you Medicare was untouched. That's not a policy disagreement. It's just a lie. And here's what the bill actually does when you strip away the name and the patriotic packaging. It cuts almost $1 trillion from Medicaid. It raises health insurance costs. It eliminates nutrition programs. Every single one of those cuts exists to fund tax breaks for the wealthiest people and corporations in this country. It's not an opinion. It's what's in the bill. The people absorbing the blow first are rural communities, where the nearest hospital was already an hour away and is now closed. Low-income families, the elderly, people of color, the people with the fewest options at the least and the least cushion to absorb a hit this big. It's not over. Starting in December, low-income adults who rely on Medicaid will be required to log at least 80 hours a month of what the bill calls community engagement, either work, volunteering, or education, just to keep their health coverage. Miss the requirement for any reason, and you lose your insurance. There is no grace period. There is no appeals process that works in your favor. Think about who actually gets hit. Single parents with unpredictable schedules, people in rural areas that with no nearby employer or no public transit, people who are sick, not sick enough to qualify for an exemption, but too sick to reliably meet an 80-hour monthly requirement. This isn't about self-sufficiency. It's about finding a bureaucratic way to take health care away from people who need it and can't fight back. It's a policy designed to look reasonable on paper and be devastating in practice. I'll keep talking about this every week if I have to, because 800 closed healthcare facilities is not a statistic. It's a body count. And from hospitals, we're going to go to the battlefield, because both of these are what happens when people in power won't be straight with the American public. We are now 3 months into a conflict with Iran. 3 months. I want to ask the simplest possible question. Not a partisan question, not an ideological question, just a basic one. What is the end game? What are we trying to accomplish? What does winning look like? When does this end? And what does the end actually look like when it gets here? Because nobody in the administration can tell you. They oscillate between threatening airstrikes and floating diplomatic overtures, sometimes in the same week. And neither path has produced anything resembling a clear direction, let alone a resolution. And on Memorial Day, that should land differently. Today, we're supposed to be honoring the people who gave their lives in service of this country. The absolute least we owe them, the absolute least we owe their families, is an honest question, or an honest answer to the question of why we're asking the next generation to do the same. Real people are paying the price for this right now. The sailors on the USS Gerald R. Ford came home in May after nearly a year away, through 2 conflicts, a fire. And I want to say this specifically because it matters. Problems with the ship's sewage system. A year away from their kids, their spouses, their parents, for a conflict that the American public has never been given a straight explanation for. And while those families were waiting, Iranian Americans were marching on Washington, thousands of people whose lives sit right in the middle of this, who have family on both sides of it, trying to get somebody in power to pay attention. The press coverage has been inconsistent at best. You get a burst of headlines when something escalates, and then 2 weeks of silence. And then we're surprised when the public doesn't feel informed. In making a commitment right here out loud so that I'm accountable to it, I'm going to find a guest who can speak to this in real depth, not talking points, not spin, someone who can walk us through the geopolitical stakes, the historical context, and the honest question of who benefits from dragging this on indefinitely. The American public deserves that conversation, and I intend to have it. So here's where the hospitals and the Iran conflict and everything else connects. because what ties all of it together is the question of accountability. Who do the people in power answer to? And what happens when they start dismantling the mechanisms that make accountability possible? That's what this segment's about. Because on April 29th, the Supreme Court issued a 6-3 ruling in Louisiana versus Calais, and I want to walk you through this carefully because each piece connects to the next. The ruling effectively guts Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, the provision that required it required states to draw electoral maps giving racial minority voters a meaningful opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. That protection is now, in practical terms, gone. Here's what the ruling actually says. The state now only violates the law if it intentionally drew maps to diminish minority voting power because of race. You have to prove intent. And anyone who knows or understands how gerrymandering actually works, knowing that intent is almost never written down. It's almost impossible to prove in court. So in practice, states can now draw maps that effectively silence black and brown voters, and as long as they don't put the racist motivation in a memo, the courts can't touch them. Justice Elena Kagan, wrote the dissent. She calls it what it is. It's a gutting of a landmark civil rights law. The week after the ruling, a North Carolina state lawmaker who had been fighting his state's gerrymandering Senate map for years dropped his lawsuit entirely. His words, the Voting Rights Act is now a meaningless law with no teeth. You really have to think about what that law represents. People marched for it. People were beaten, bloody for it on the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. The country watched that happen on television and was horrified enough to demand action. President Johnson signed it into law in 1965. And now a sitting state legislator, someone actively working in government today, is calling it meaningless. On Memorial Day, the day we honor people who died for the ideals of this country, is supposed to be representing. Now, Trump. Within 1 hour of that ruling coming down, the Republican-controlled Florida House approved an aggressive gerrymandering map that could deliver Republicans 4 additional House seats. Democratic incumbents who currently hold those seats are now in serious jeopardy. And then Trump went on social media and said the quiet part out loud, as it's just his thing. He insisted Republicans should use the ruling to redraw the maps immediately, even in states where primaries were already underway, even in states where people had already cast ballots. His exact framing, if they want to have a vote, sorry, I messed that up. His exact quote was, if they have to vote twice, so be it. The President of the United States said people should vote twice in new elections on new maps, redrawn specifically to favor his party because he didn't like the results of the current maps and what they might produce. It's not a gaffe, it's strategy. It doesn't stop there. Trump has been pushing simultaneously to eliminate the Senate filibuster, require voter ID and proof of citizenship, and end mail-in voting. And here's the part that I can't get over. He keeps saying explicitly that these changes are designed to help Republicans win in the 2026 midterms. Not election integrity, not protecting democracy, just winning. He's not disguising it, he's broadcasting it. Louisiana has halted its ongoing primaries and declared an emergency to redraw the maps. Tennessee is reportedly next. Georgia is reviewing its options, and South Carolina, our state, is among those identified where this ruling could be used to redraw districts in ways that dilute the voting power of minority communities. It's not abstract. This is our state. It's our districts. It's our neighbors' votes. And here's the larger context. Trump's numbers are falling. The big beautiful bill is deeply unpopular. History tells us the president's party most always loses seats in the midterm. And this president has handed people more reasons than usual to show up and vote against his agenda. So rather than change course, rather than govern differently, the plan is to change who gets to vote and how to make sure the votes do get cast, or at least the votes that do get cast don't carry equal weight. That's not politics. That is a systemic dismantling of democratic accountability. And I'm going to keep saying this on the show for as long as it needs to be said. Which brings me to the most important thing I'm going to say today. All of it. The hospitals, the conflicts, the gerrymandering, the maps being redrawn as I'm recording this, all of it gets addressed at the ballot box. And the ballot box only works if you show up. Primary season is in full swing right now across the country. And if you've been looking at a reason to pay attention, you've just listened to 3 of them. So here's where things stand. A number of states have already completed their primaries. Arkansas, North Carolina, Texas, Illinois, Mississippi, Indiana, Ohio, Nebraska, West Virginia, and Louisiana. Alabama, Georgia, Idaho, Kentucky, Oregon, and Pennsylvania held theirs just this past Tuesday. And if you're in one of those states and you didn't vote, pay attention to the runoff dates because it isn't over. Here's what's coming up fast. June 2nd, California, Iowa, Montana, New Jersey, New Mexico, and South Dakota. Early voting in several of those states is open right now. June 9th, Nevada, North Dakota, Maine, and right here in South Carolina. That is 2 weeks away from today. June 23rd, Maryland and New York. June 30th, Colorado, then Arizona, Florida, Michigan, and Washington, and Missouri. They roll through July and August. The primary calendar runs all the way through September. Now, I want to explain something that doesn't get talked about enough. In a lot of districts across the country, especially in states that lean heavily in one direction, the primary is the election. The general election in November is often a formality. The real decisions get made when the party nominee is chosen, which means if you only show up in November, you've already missed the most important vote that you could have cast. Early voting exists to tear down the barriers that keep people away from the polls. You don't have to take a day off from work. You don't have to find childcare for a specific Tuesday. You don't have to stand in lines that stretch around the block. You go when it works for you. A Saturday morning in some places, a weekend evening, a weekday evening, your lunch break. 47 states and Washington, D.C. now offer no excuse early voting. You don't have to explain yourself, you just go. 8 states, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Nevada, Oregon, Utah, Vermont, and Washington, conduct most of their elections entirely by mail. A ballot shows up your home. You fill it out on your couch, you drop it off or mail it in. It's the whole process. Here's the action item. Before you do anything today, before you close your eyes tonight, pull out your phone and go to vote411.org. It's VOTE411.org. Put in your address and it will tell you your registration status, your primary date, your early voting window, and exactly what's on your ballot. It's 5 minutes. That's all it takes. And people who are redrawing these maps are counting on your exhaustion. They are counting on your frustration. They are counting on you feeling like it doesn't matter, like the system is rigged, like showing up is pointless. That calculation, that specific bet against your participation is the foundation of everything we've talked about today. Prove them wrong. Vote early. Vote loud. Vote like people are honoring today, like the people you're honoring voted today would have wanted you to. So that is going to do it for this show. I want to come back here from where we started because I think that's the right place to end. Today is Memorial Day. We honor the people who gave their lives for something bigger than themselves. And I think the most honest way I know how to do that, beyond a moment of silence, beyond a social media post, is to stay engaged, to pay attention, to fight for a country that they believed in with the tools that we have available to us. Your vote is one of those tools. And right now, people in power are working overtime to make it count for less. The answer to that is not despair. The answer is showing up. Go to 411.org, vote 411.org, find your primary, vote early if you can. And if something you heard today made you think, made you angry, or made you want to do something, share this with somebody else who needs to hear it. And to every Gold Star family listening, we see you and we don't forget. That is going to do it for this episode. Big thanks for everyone watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget, you can follow me at Barrett Gruber across all social media. Thank you for liking and hitting that bell. And if you can, please give us a 5-star review and leave a comment. Until next time, you all stay safe, be kind, and keep your hands to yourself.